I understand it at a basic level, why some people take issue with it, right? We've seen how we pick our team at Team USA, and a lot of people think it's not, and it comes back to this word, fair, okay? And fair is a loaded word, and it's a word that I think it's a simplification of things. And if you say, because it's easy to win the argument based on fair, right? Because if one person is already at the finish line and another person has to start all the way back here, that is not equal or not fair. But is it right? Is it what they should do? Is it what USA Wrestling should be doing to pick their team? I have and continue to argue, yes, it is. It is the right way to do it. And I believe we see it play out in college wrestling, in high school wrestling, and basically sports across the board. And it comes back to a principal issue, which is, or a principal question, like, what have you done? What is your track record? And you think about a national champion on the wrestling team, okay? Let's say you're a coach of some team and you have a returning NCAA champion in your lineup, okay, back at that same weight class. And you do wrestle-offs. You know, most teams have like a wrestle-off. Sometimes they're televised or streamed, sometimes not. But basically, most teams have a ranking matches type of thing or wrestle-offs. And if your wrestler, that your NCAA champion, were to lose in the wrestle-off, what would you do? It's not even a thought, right? It's like, well, we're not just gonna throw this guy to the bench because he lost a wrestle-off, right? That's a data point. We have this data that says he beat everyone in the nation in March, and that's highly relevant. And so what do you do? Well, you make the bar to pass that guy way higher. It's not going to be a one-off wrestle-off match. I mean, to bench an All-American or returning NCAA qualifier, the coaches raise that bar. We've seen it with multiple teams. They'll lose a wrestle-off, they're like, okay, well, we'll go to a couple tournaments here and compare results. It's a process, right? And for you as the underdog, the freshman, whoever's coming in trying to take the NCAA champion spot, it's on you to prove above and beyond you're better before that coach is going to give you the lineup. This is not my opinion. This is what happens every single year in NCAA wrestling. This is how all the best coaches determine their team. They don't fall in love with one match, one thing. They look at the bigger picture, right? And in many ways, that's exactly what USA Wrestling is doing. They're charged with not having a competition that is dead even across the board. They're charged with putting the best team on the mat at the World and Olympic Championships. That is the charge. That is what they're trying to do. Don't get confused. That's the goal. That's the whole point of this, right? Winning. And so winning comes with you stick with what's proven. But, so we have the 2 out of 3, and a lot of times the 2 out of 3 wrestler wins. And you could say, well, that's because they did this. Well, there's also a lot of examples of wrestlers that have come through. I mean, look what Aaron Brooks just did. Will you ever find a deck more stacked against someone than what we saw at the 2024 Olympic team trials? A more difficult path to navigate. I think Kyle Dakes in 2013 is up there. And he was unable to beat Jordan there, but he came closer than many people thought he would. 2015 is similar. Didn't take a match. 2017. But here's what Aaron Brooks had to do. He had to go through Connor Mirasoli, he's a high schooler, okay, fine. He had to go through Alex Daringer, 3-time NCAA champion. He had to go through Zahid Valencia, a reigning world bronze medalist. And then 6 hours later, he has to make weight. He wins that match at 10:45 p.m., immediately has to cut weight, gets a little bit of sleep, weighs in at 7:30, and he's wrestling at 10 o'clock against who? Against the pound-for-pound #1 wrestler in the world, right? And that is not a FloWrestling opinion. That is not an American opinion. That is an indisputable, widely held opinion across the world, that David Taylor is the best wrestler walking the planet. And Aaron Brooks had to go and beat him twice, and he had You got to relax those first couple of days. So it can be done. We've seen it done. We've seen Thomas Gilman qualify through the last chance World Team Qualifier and then win the Challenge Tournament and then win 57. We've seen many wrestlers do it, okay? And I think it's appropriate to have that bar high. If you're going to replace a world medalist or an Olympic medalist or a world champion, the barrier is high. Chance Marsteller did it last year to the American's greatest of all time, Jordan Burroughs. He had to run through the Challenge Tournament and win that, and then he had to go through, or he had to win the US Open, then he had to beat Jordan Burroughs twice. He had to do more than Jordan, but he did it, and he was able to get it done, and he was able to prove that, he was the guy. Now, same for Zane Richards last year. Zane had to win the Open, and then he had to beat Thomas Gilman twice. This is not easy to do. It's very, very difficult. So if it's as stacked as you say, it should really never happen. But the reality is it can be done. And when they're still at the level, right, they keep their spot. Kyle Snyder, he keeps his spot. He's not going to lose his spot. Mason Paris keeps his spot. Kyle Dake, he's been in this situation for a couple years now. He keeps his spot. So I think there's a lack of credit being given for the guys sitting out just for how good they are because they keep coming back with world medals. And that's ultimately what every college coach falls back on, what this guy did at the NCAA tournament. And you may be a young up-and-comer, but for me to bench my national champion, the bar is just going to be higher on what you're going to have to prove this year to usurp my champion, right? And I think that's fair. Now, are there issues with the process as it currently exists? I think so. Absolutely. I think there's no, now there may be reasons, so I won't say there's no reason. I don't understand why you wouldn't have the challenge tournament and those results and then take a beat, take a couple weeks, and then let's have the 2 out of 3. I think this solves a lot of things. I think one, you don't bring an exhausted guy to the mat at 10 a.m. in the morning, actually 7:30 in the morning to weigh in, and then 10 o'clock to wrestle. You don't have an exhausted guy because if you're trying to simulate something, no one is that depleted going into it compared to an opponent that hasn't wrestled at all. That really doesn't happen. So if you're trying to simulate it, and now we know it's not an apples to apples simulation, right? Because the World Championships is one bracket and everyone's going through the same thing. But we're not exactly trying to fully simulate that either because we're letting guys sit out. So I think what would be reasonable is you do the challenge tournament, that sets the matchup. The matchup's a week or 2 later. You can actually market it, which is a separate thing, but I think an important thing. Instead of, 12 hours, 8 of which are in the middle of the night, you have 2 weeks or a week to promote it. And maybe, NBC and Peacock can get behind it and give a little more support for wrestling. But right now, what are we giving them to work with? Got the biggest star in wrestling, Spencer Lee, one of them, certainly, wrestling at 10 a.m. Eastern, right? He's done by lunchtime. So that's not great. You're not giving NBC a lot to work with. There's stuff you could do. You're not giving NBC a lot to work with Brooks versus David because you didn't know it would be Brooks until 10:45 the night before, right? So there's a lot of opportunity there. And that's separate from, is it the best way to pick a team? I think it's the best way of protecting the medalists, but also not having just an unreasonable gauntlet for the challenge tournament wrestlers to go through. I think it's the best of both worlds. And they need to also figure out how they're going to drop in the wrestlers sitting out to the semis. The world medalists like Zane Rutherford, Zahid Valencia, they had to buy the semis, but it made it so some wrestlers had to go way more matches than others. I'm not talking about Zane Rutherford. The top seeded guy would only have 2, and someone like Jesse Mendez would have to do 4. So that's an easy fix that they should make. But overall, I like in non-Olympic years, I really like how USA does their process. I think there's small tweaks that can make it awesome on Olympic years as well, and I hope they would consider it.